This is Kim Wilson, and I'm on the faculty of the Fletcher School and delighted to be making this presentation to you. So this series, which is 4 videos, starts off with reasons, roots, and costs. What are we talking about? Well, we're talking about the financial journey of refugees. Our source material comes from studies that we took with students, alums, other faculty members between 2016 and 2020. We're very grateful to our sponsors. In this video lecture, we learn some key definitions and statistics. We examine how refugees and migrants are reflected in the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We explore why people leave their homes and lives to venture forth into a world of utter uncertainty. And we investigate a few of the many routes and destinations. So if we think of a journey as 3 big phases, before, during, and after, this video focuses on these first 2 phases. First, let's get some background on migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers. All refugees have been asylum seekers, but not all asylum seekers are granted refugee status. A refugee is someone who is unable or unwilling to return to their country of origin, owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or political opinion. Migrants are said to be voluntarily displaced, but our research finds that many migrants have left identical circumstances as refugees. So why did people leave? Why did migrants and refugees leave? Well, high on the list was conflict, political, religious, or sexual persecution, grinding poverty, environmental disaster. For example, the earthquake in Nepal drove out hundreds of thousands of people. Military conscription in countries like Syria or Eritrea, where young men are fearful of being drafted and having to be put in a situation where they're fighting alongside the government with their friends and neighbors. Household or clan conflicts were very important. A clan conflict could revolve around land, or household conflict could be abuse. Social shaming came up. So that's when a young man would say to us, well, I left because my parents or my uncles said, my cousin made this journey, why can't I? And so there was a lot of pressure to take the journey. Many people journeyed in order to rejoin their family. So for example, from Afghanistan, they want to go to Germany because maybe they have a son and a grandson there. Education and economic opportunity rated high on the list. And let's not forget adventure. Yes, many young men had the spirit of wanderlust and were eager to go out and explore the world. A big lesson for us was that people may leave for one set of reasons, but they choose their destination for another. So for example, they may leave because of persecution, but they choose their destination for economic opportunity or the chance to rejoin a family member. So here's a few statistics. 258 million people are international migrants. 150 million of them are migrant workers. So think of people working from India or Bangladesh that might be working in Saudi Arabia. 68.5 million individuals were forcibly displaced, of which 25 million were granted refugee status. So many people were not granted that status. There's many reasons for that. Of this number, 6 million are in camps. So most people are living outside of camps, in towns and cities. And a person's status can change as they move or even as they stay in place. So IOM, the International Organization for Migration, calls this going in and out of irregularity as laws and policies change. So you could be perfectly legal in Turkey, move to Greece, be perfectly legal in Greece, but then when the policy shifts, you wouldn't be necessarily legal in the Northern European countries. At one point you were. So those policies change. Same thing, South America. You can be legal traveling through Costa Rica, but if you're a migrant trying to get through Nicaragua, you become illegal. Migrants, refugees, and the SDGs. So on the refugee side of things, goal number 16 houses that. So that goal is promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. The indicator that UNHCR posited for that, and its other stakeholders, was the number of refugees by country of origin as a proportion of the national population of that country of origin. So in other words, the percentage of a country's population that is displaced and living abroad. IOM posited this for goal 10. The goal says reduce inequality and within and among countries. The indicator is number of countries with migration policies that facilitate orderly, safe, regular, and responsible migration. So back to our research. We had 3 questions. First, what motivates men, women, and families to leave their countries of origin and embark on tumultuous, harrowing journeys? What was the nature of those journeys? And what routes did they take, and what were their major costs? So which routes? Well, in Greece, we interviewed people, in Turkey and Jordan, all the 3 countries, we interviewed people coming from Asia and the Middle East, as well as the Horn of Africa and West Africa, as well as North Africa. In Costa Rica, Colombia, and Ecuador, we spoke to people that were coming from South Asia and parts of Africa, working their way up through South America, northbound to the US and Canada. How did we get the information that we got? We got quite a bit. We developed a technique called journey mapping that helped us sketch out financial issues, leg by leg along a route. Here you can see an example of that. At each leg that was drawn, we would ask questions. What were the circumstances? Who did you have to pay off? Were there particular dangers? And you can see us here asking these questions. This is the man in the yellow shirt is a dentist from Afghanistan, and he shared with us every inch of his journey. And the photo below shows an Algerian man who's sketching out his journey and telling us about it as he does so. Whenever possible, we interviewed people in their mother tongues. We tried not to work with interpreters. So this meant we had an army of students and alums helping us in Dari, Bangla, Nepali, Hindi, Arabic, French, Spanish, even some Twi. We did the best we could. So routes and costs, here are some examples. Afghanistan to Greece was about $7,500 a person, of which about $5 went towards smugglers. From Homs, Turkey, it was substantially less. You're just paying a smuggler at the border to spirit you across. So it was $500. Notice this map from Eritrea to Greece via Sudan, Israel, Rwanda, Sudan again, and Turkey. This man had left Eritrea, was able to journey to Israel, worked there for 6 years, and then was sent to Rwanda unceremoniously and given $3,500 to stay basically out of Israel. The total cost of his journey was $14,000. That included the first journey as well as his return. When he got to Rwanda, he didn't find work. He didn't want to stay there, and he moved northward to Turkey, which is where we interviewed him. Here are some other routes and costs. I won't read them all to you, but notice they range widely from $1,750 to $26,000. Basically, Asians and South Asians were paying much more than people from Africa. Why? Because Africans were able to get visas in Brazil or Ecuador, and Asians had to be smuggled. So that was requiring that smuggling really inflated the cost. And this really low of $1,750 was, we interviewed several stowaways, and they didn't pay much for their journey. So Nepal to Costa Rica, you can see, is expensive. uh, $30,000 per head. Factors affecting journey vulnerability. Suddenness departure was a huge factor. Whether people were single or in a family. And that could cut both ways. Sometimes families looked more sympathetic and people were nice to them. Sometimes they preferred single people. Gender and ethnicity, very important. Country of origin, also important. Some countries were considered more sympathetic countries, like Syria versus Afghanistan. You might have people with the exact same backgrounds, but there was preference. There was a hierarchy when they were being registered by UNHCR and some of the NGOs. The ability to receive remittances was very important. Wealth in people's social networks that they could tap, people that were forward in the journey or perhaps back at home. The quality and quantity of saleable assets in their home countries. How much money could they muster? The ability to procure quality documents mattered in terms of their safety. If they had good documents, they were not subject to abuse or bribes. The number of borders crossed was very important. Think of currency exchanges, different languages, different chances of being ripped off. And how people paid their smuggler mattered, and we're going to discuss that in a later video. It was hugely important. And there were financial factors too. What were some of the financial pain points? Well, you can imagine them. Converting currency, local currency into hard currency and back and forth again, getting ripped off. Losing things, giant fear of losing their phones. People would carry 2 wallets, 2 phones. They would stash money in pockets, belts, shoes, even in the chargers of cell phones. Nearly every journey had a central ordeal. So this is the Zagros Mountains, and the Afghans mentioned this as one of the most perilous moments of their journey to Greece. Why? They're very high, they're very steep, they have huge crevasses, and they saw bodies, dead bodies in those crevasses. This was very traumatizing. You've seen these pictures before, crossing the Mediterranean from Turkey or from North Africa. Maybe you haven't seen this one. This is the Darien Gap, which is a piece of land about the size of Massachusetts between Panama and Colombia. And it's thickly jungled, and it's filled with poisonous snakes, with all kinds of wildlife, wild cats, including jaguars. It's also filled with drug traffickers and a collection of thugs that our journeyers called the mafia. What were journey perils and mitigation strategies? Well, they got separated from family members, and people complained about this a lot. It was terrifying. Some were able to track each other back down through WhatsApp and Facebook, but not everybody. Physical medical injuries could stop a journey altogether. The theft of phone or money could be remedied by remittances or borrowing from fellow travelers. We saw a lot of that, particularly between Africans and Asians traveling through the Americas. Loss of documentation was a big stressor. And so people would try to replace it, but often they resorted to purchasing fake documents. Detention by authorities or detention by smugglers involved paying of bribes. And there were safety threats. Women said that they had to pay more for the exact same journey because they had to shelter. They could not sleep out on the streets. It wasn't possible for them. So in summary, the term refugee has a technical definition, but our work shows that refugees, migrants, and asylum seekers often share similar circumstances. In terms of human security, we are concerned about vulnerable members of any of these categories, regardless of how they're categorized. The journey costs could surge up to $40,000 for those who were highly smuggled, while most journeyers relayed their central ordeals based on geography. But many faced common perils despite the geography. Thank you.